These reports reinforce the need for increased investment in development. We see the development deficit as part of that creation of fertile ground for expansion of these activities. Now is not the time to defund development.
When this research is questioning conventional wisdom, it is about making sure that our citizens who are being left behind, the African villages that 50 years ago were drinking brown water and in the 21st century are still drinking brown water, that must stop. Otherwise, we'll have violent extremism.
The idea that terrorism festers in an environment of mistrust of the state, in an environment where the state is seen as an enemy and not a facilitator of the right to self-determination. Everybody wants self-determined development. And I think the reason why over the last 10 years we have seen a dramatic reduction in terrorist attacks, particularly of the local character, is because, number one, government has implemented an ever-broadening regime of rights. Number two, because of the constitutional imperative for transparency, we are seeing a lot more public engagement and public participation by the citizenry. And then number three, because of devolved governance, local voices and local priorities are being incorporated into development, and therefore people can be able to have hope.
What do you feel is the most significant recommendation that has come out of this report?
When you look at the element, of ideology or religion, there's a significant difference. In the first report, it was about 40%, and now it's about 17%, and much less among women, interestingly enough. And women tend to join more with families and husbands, while men tend to join, with friends. The other element which I wanted to highlight is the role of the internet, because we hear this a lot, in other regions of how it's used very much for mobilization. But here what we found was that those who had less exposure to the internet, less accessibility, about 77% of voluntary recruits joined. So it's more of the peer, to peer. One thing that I wanted to highlight is the same primary reason for joining is the same reason for leaving. And this is really disillusionment and expectations not being met.
Once people disengage, what do they return to?
One of the things is that a lot of people who are coming back want to be reintegrated back into their communities.
How important is mentorship in being able to get people to disengage from violent extremism and to re-engage?
Many more young people decide not to join than the very little that decides to join. Question is, why did they not join? The report talks about people who are saying, we are leaving the group because the aspirations which they sold to us, they are not keeping. It's the same thing they talked about the government, what the politicians promised, the roads, the schools and everything. And that's why mentorship is very important. The question is, do we tap extensively from other young people who have stories that can build hope, to share this hope with the ones who feel so dissatisfied, so worried, and they go to pick arms? That's the big question. I think that the reflection should be, how do we leverage on the continent's best practices amongst young people to inspire? It is important that we shine the light on young people who have not carried arms, and also inspire the ones who are carried to say, the fact that you're from a poor home, the fact that your community does not have light, does not mean you cannot be the light in your community.
Trauma is a deep consequence of the actions of violent extremist groups. Widespread, profound trauma. But again, it is an area where there is hope. And you talked about the ways in which communities and social groups can help those traumatized back into a positive engagement with society. The detachment of young people from violent groups is part of that healing of trauma, which also prevents the cycle of violence recurring. I would like to ask ourselves, is there a way in which we can draw on the experience of detaching individuals to think about detaching entire groups from the violent context in which they operate?